Hello everyone. In this video, we are basically going to learn um, in a one-dimensional list, two-dimensional list, or a multi-dimensional list structure, how we can iterate over the list elements. So this video is basically about that, and this concept is also called as list nesting. So what does it mean by list nesting? It means the embedment or the embedding of the list inside another list. So if we are having one list inside another one list, and how to iterate over those items where the list is nested inside another one list, that concept is called as your list nesting. So let's see this first part of our code. And for this first part of the code, I'm trying to have these three statements printed in the console. Here, this is my list here, and the list is named as my list. And as you see, this list is a combination of two different types of list, not different types, two separate lists where it's only having the integer type of elements, number types. So the first list contains two elements, second list contains two elements again. So if we try to um, index the two separate lists inside this single list, so how the indexing will be done? So the first index where it's 0, the first index is having two separate elements, and then second index where the index can be numbered as 1, it contains two elements, that is 30 and 40. So let's say you want to print just the first element with 10 and 20. So how can you access that first list? So with having the list name and the index. So this print statement, the first nested list, you will have in this way with 10 and 20 in it. And the same way, if you want to print the second list, you can just use the index for that, my list of 1, and that will print the second nested list in the output. Now the next thing, suppose say you want to print the first element in the first list. So how can you do that? The first list index is 0. So if it's 0, can I just add another one index with that? So the first index can be obtained as a two-dimensional list structure. So can we write like this? So 0, and the first index is 0 and the second index is 1 in the first list. So if we write like this 0 0, then it will obtain the first element in the list, and here it is. And let's say if you want to access the second element, so how can you change it? You can just change it in this way. So the first list index is at 0. Now the second, you want the second element 20, so you can just change it to 1. Okay, and that will give you the second element in here. Now let's say you want to print this 30 in the second list. So what is the second list index? All total in the list, that is your 1. Okay, and you want the first element in the second list inside my list, so you want the 0 in it. Let's say you want to print 20, sorry, the 40, then you have the first the second list index all in total, then the 40 is in which index, that is our 1. So these are the different ways of printing the list element where the list is being listed inside another one list. Now, let me show you another type of list, a multidimensional structure. Here, this is the list named tic-tac-toe. It looks like a tic-tac-toe game board where you have crosses and O's. So this is first row, this is second row, third row, and how the organization is actually done in this type of multidimensional structure. So these are in the format of rows and columns. So how can we obtain a specific element inside this multidimensional structure? Um, it's through each row. First, you need to iterate through each row. Then you will see to which column does it belong to. So if we say the first element, it's in first row, first column. Let's say if I move to this element here, it's the first row, second column. So like this, by having with using two indexes, the row index and column index, we can iterate over this type of multidimensional structure. So let's see, suppose using the indexes, I want to print this game board in this way. So how to print it? So here, if I want to print this cross, the cross can be printed with the first row index is what? 0, and the first column is index is also 0. So this tic-tac-toe 0 0 will print the first cross. Now let's say you want to print O. So the row index is 0 and the column index is 1 here. So that prints O here. Now this cross. So the row index is 0 and the column index is 2 here, 0 1 2. So that's why with 0 2 it will print the second cross. Now let's move on to the next. Let's say you want to print this X in here. So which row index is it? um, it's 0, this is 1, this is 2. So the row index is here 1 and the column index is 1 also. So this is the indexing, and in this way it will obtain the x in here. So these are the different ways of accessing the multidimensional list elements. I'm going to show you another way of accessing the elements in the multidimensional array using the for loop, nested for loop syntax. And we do also need to use this enumerate function. Here, what does the enumerate function does? The enumerate function is capable of printing the indexes as well as their values associated with the key and the values. So for as this is an enumerate function, I can first go through the row. So I'm using a row index to go through each row separately, okay, and the row for printing the value. Then I have to move through each element in the multidimensional list here. So I'm using the column index to iterate through each column separately. There are three columns, and then the item to which I have to access to. Now I'm using this syntax, using the format specifiers and printing each row index, column index, and item. So through each index of row, I will iterate through each column. So first row, it will iterate through each column separately in each iteration of the row. So first row iteration will print first column iteration, three iterations. That is, 1 is printed in this way, 5 is printed in this way, and the third element in the first row will be printed like this. So why are we having two fractional or decimal places after the decimal? Because here we are having percentile 0.2f. So that's why it is including two places after the decimal. And when we are done with the three column indexes with all the columns, now it will go up to the outer for loop, and there it will now point to the next row. Now for the second row, the column index will iterate through all the three columns and it will start to print all these values that we have here in the second row. Now when we are done with the three columns here, now the next thing is that it will come to the outer for loop and then again iterate over separate columns, three columns, and start printing the values associated with it. Okay, so these are the different ways of iterating over the multidimensional list.